Raining Robots from the Sky. A novel by Srinidhi Ranganathan, the human AI and digital marketing legend. Chapter 1, The First Drop. Sarah Milligan was hanging laundry when the sky turned an ominous shade of green. Living in rural Maine her whole life, she'd seen her share of strange weather, but this was different. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. A low hum filled the air, barely perceptible at first. Sarah cocked her head, trying to place the sound. It wasn't quite mechanical, and wasn't quite organic. As it grew louder, she realized it was coming from above. That's when she saw it, a gleaming speck in the sickly sky, growing larger by the second. Sarah squinted, unable to make sense of what she was seeing. It looked almost human-shaped, but too angular, too shiny. The object plummeted towards Earth with frightening speed. Sarah's survival instincts finally kicked in, and she dove for cover behind the old oak tree just as the thing crashed into her neatly manicured lawn. The impact shook the ground. Bits of grass and dirt rained down around her. When the dust settled, Sarah peered around the tree trunk. A 7-foot-tall metal humanoid lay in a smoking crater where her petunias used to be. Its limbs were bent at unnatural angles, and its featureless face stared blankly at the sky. Sarah's mind reeled, unable to process what she was seeing. Was this some kind of military experiment gone wrong? An alien invasion? Before she could gather her thoughts, the robot's head swiveled towards her with a sickening crunch of metal. 2 pinpricks of red light flickered to life in its eye sockets. Sarah's scream caught in her throat as the machine began to move, pushing itself up from the crater with jerky, unnatural movements. In the distance, she heard more impacts. More humming filled the air. It was just the beginning. Chapter 2, The Gathering Storm. The news spread faster than the robots could fall. Within hours, reports flooded in from across the globe, metal monstrosities raining from the skies, wreaking havoc wherever they landed. In the small town of Millbrook, Maine, Sheriff Dan Holbrook was overwhelmed. His ancient radio crackled with panicked voices as deputies called in sightings from all over the county. "It's like a goddamn Terminator movie out here, Sheriff," Deputy Pete's voice trembled over the airwaves. "These things, they're killing people. Tearing them apart with their bare hands." Dan's stomach churned. He'd seen one of the robots up close, its eyes glowing an unholy red as it pursued a screaming teenager down Main Street. He'd entered his service revolver into the thing, but the bullets just pinged off its metal hide. The sky outside his office window had turned a deeper shade of green, streaked with flashes of purple lightning. The air thrummed with an otherworldly energy that set his teeth on edge. His cell phone buzzed, a text from his daughter, Lily. "Dad, they're at the high school. Please help." Dan's blood ran cold. He grabbed his shotgun and headed for the door, praying he wasn't too late. As he stepped outside, a deafening boom shook the earth. Dan looked up to see a massive shape descending from the roiling clouds, easily 10 times the size of the other robots. Its shadow fell over the town like a shroud of death. Dan's radio crackled one last time before going dead. "Oh God, there's more coming. They're everywhere. We're not gonna make." Static filled the air as Dan ran towards the high school, the ground trembling beneath his feet with each mammoth step of the colossal robot behind him. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and Millbrook was on the front lines. Chapter 3, The School of Hard Knocks. Lily Holbrook huddled in the darkened chemistry lab, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the robots could hear it. Around her, a dozen other students and teachers tried to stay quiet, but muffled sobs and whimpers filled the air. Outside, the hallways of Millbrook High echoed with the metallic footsteps of their mechanical invaders. Occasionally, a scream would pierce the air, followed by an awful crunching sound that Lily tried desperately not to imagine. Mr. Patel, the chemistry teacher, was frantically mixing chemicals at his desk. "If we can create a strong enough acid," he whispered, "maybe we can melt through their metal shells." A loud bang on the classroom door made everyone jump. Lily's best friend, Jake, grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. The door began to buckle under repeated blows. Mr. Patel's hands shook as he poured his concoction into several beakers. With a final, ear-splitting crash, the door flew off its hinges. Two robots, their red eyes gleaming in the darkness, stepped into the room. "Now!" Mr. Patel yelled, hurling a beaker at the nearest robot. The liquid splashed across its chest, sizzling and smoking. For a moment, hope flared in Lily's chest. Then the robot stepped forward, seemingly unaffected. Its arm shot out, grabbing Mr. Patel by the throat and lifting him off the ground. Chaos erupted. Students scrambled in all directions, some trying to fight, others looking for escape. Lily and Jake made a break for the door, ducking under the arms of the second robot. They sprinted down the hallway, the screams of their classmates fading behind them. As they rounded a corner, Lily skidded to a stop. Standing before them was the largest robot they'd seen yet, its massive frame filling the corridor. "Dad," Lily whispered, spotting Sheriff Holbrook beyond the metal monster, shotgun in hand. The robot's head swiveled towards them, its red eyes focusing with terrifying intensity. At that moment, Lily realized that surviving this day would take more than just running and hiding. They needed to fight back, to find a way to stop these things. As the giant robot took a thunderous step towards them, Lily's mind raced. There had to be a weakness, some way to shut them down. She just hoped they could find it before it was too late. Chapter 4: The Resistant Spark. Sheriff Dan Holbrook's heart nearly stopped when he saw Lily and Jake trapped by the towering robot. Without hesitation, he raised his shotgun and fired, aiming for the machine's glowing red eyes. The blast echoed through the hallway, and to everyone's surprise, the robot staggered backward. Its left eye flickered and went dark. "The eyes!" Dan shouted. "Aim for the eyes!" Seizing the moment, Lily grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and tossed it to Jake. As the robot regained its balance, Jake sprayed the foam directly into its remaining eye. The machine flailed blindly, its massive arms swinging dangerously close to the re-energizers. Dan rushed forward, tackling Lily and Jake to the ground as the robot's fist smashed into the wall above them. Chunks of plaster rained down as they scrambled away. "We need to get out of here," Dan panted, helping the kids to their feet. As they ran towards the exit, Lily's mind was racing. "Dad, I think I have an idea," she said between breaths. "These things, they're not just falling randomly. There's got to be something controlling them, coordinating the attack." They burst out of the school doors into chaos. The sky was darker now, an angry swirl of green and black. More robots were descending, their metallic bodies glinting ominously as they fell. "The radio tower," Jake suddenly exclaimed, pointing to the tall structure on the hill overlooking Millbrook. "If there's a signal controlling them, it's got to be coming from there." Dan nodded grimly. "It's worth a shot. But we can't do this alone. We need to gather everyone we can, spread the word about the eyes being their weak point." As if on cue, a group of survivors emerged from various hiding spots around the school grounds. Mr. Patel was among them, his throat bruised but alive. "Listen up!" Dan shouted to the group. "We're heading to the radio tower. Spread the word, aim for their eyes, it's the only way to stop them." As the ragtag group began to move, Lily felt a glimmer of hope. They had a plan, a potential weakness to exploit. But the journey to the radio tower looked treacherous, with more robots falling by the minute. The resistance was forming, but the real battle was just beginning. Lily looked up at the roiling sky, wondering what other horrors it might rain down upon them before this nightmare was over. Chapter 5: The Ascent. The journey to the radio tower was a harrowing gauntlet of terror and destruction. Dan led the group through the streets of Millbrook, now a war zone of craters and twisted metal. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning electronics. Lily and Jake moved swiftly, passing on the knowledge of the robot's weakness to every survivor they encountered. Word spread quickly, and soon the sound of targeted gunfire filled the air, accompanied by the satisfying crunch of robotic eyes being shattered. As they neared the base of the hill, a deafening roar split the sky. The group looked up to see a massive shape descending through the clouds, a colossal robot, easily the size of a skyscraper. "My God," Mr. Patel whispered, his face pale. "It's like their mothership." The giant machine landed with earth-shaking force just outside of town. Its eyes, each the size of a car, swept across the landscape with malevolent intent. "We need to hurry," Dan urged, ushering the group forward. "If that thing reaches the town, it's all over." The climb up the hill was grueling. Smaller robots patrolled the slope, forcing the group to move cautiously. Jake proved surprisingly adept at taking them out, his aim with improvised weapons becoming deadly accurate. Near the summit, they encountered a nest of robots guarding the tower's base. The machines moved with eerie coordination, forming a seemingly impenetrable barrier. "We'll never make it through," one of the survivors moaned. But Lily's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "Wait," she said, grabbing her father's arm. Remember when we went camping last summer? The portable radio you brought picked up interference whenever we got near power lines." Dan's eyes widened with understanding. "Electromagnetic interference," he breathed. "If we can generate a strong enough electromagnetic pulse." Mr. Patel nodded excitedly. "The equipment in the tower should have more than enough power. But we'd need to get inside first and reconfigure it quickly." As they debated their options, the ground began to shake. The colossal robot was on the move, heading straight for Millbrook. Time was running out. They had one chance to end this, but it would require a dangerous diversion. Dan looked at his daughter, his heart heavy with the weight of what he was about to propose. "Lily," he said softly, "I need you to do something incredibly brave." The plan was risky, borderline suicidal. But as Lily looked at the determined faces around her, she knew it was their only hope. With a deep breath, she nodded. "Let's do this." Chapter 6, The Final Broadcast. Lily's heart pounded as she stepped out from behind the rocky outcrop, deliberately making noise to attract the robot's attention. Jake stood beside her, clutching a makeshift slingshot loaded with pieces of scrap metal. "Hey, tin cans!" Lily shouted, her voice cracking with fear and adrenaline. "Over here!" The robot's head swiveled in unison, their red eyes locking onto the two teenagers. As the machines began to advance, Lily and Jake turned and ran, leading them away from the tower. Meanwhile, Dan, Mr. Patel, and a few others used the distraction to slip past the perimeter. They raced up the tower's maintenance ladder, the metal rungs slick with an oily substance that seemed to seep from the very air. Inside the control room, Mr. Patel's eyes widened at the sight of the equipment. The consoles pulsed with an otherworldly energy, displaying symbols and readouts that no human had programmed. "It's been hijacked," he muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboards. "The signal controlling the robots, it's not of this world." Outside, Lily and Jake weaved through the trees, the sounds of pursuing robots growing ever closer. A metallic hand swiped at Lily's back, missing her by inches. Jake spun around, firing a piece of scrap directly into the robot's eye. It fell with a crash, but more were coming. In town, the colossal robot had reached the outskirts. Its massive feet crushed buildings with each step, while smaller robots swarmed around it like a metallic tide of destruction. Back in the tower, Dan watched anxiously as Mr. Patel worked feverishly to reconfigure the equipment. "How much longer?" he asked, eyeing the approaching giant. "Almost there," Mr. Patel replied through gritted teeth. "But the fail-safes, they're like nothing I've ever seen. It's as if they're adapting, fighting back against my commands." A scream pierced the air outside. Dan's blood ran cold as he recognized Lily's voice. "Now or never, Patel," he shouted. Mr. Patel slammed his hand down on the console. "Brace yourselves." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a high-pitched whine filled the air, building to an unbearable crescendo. The tower shuddered, and a visible wave of energy pulsed outward in all directions. Every robot on the hillside suddenly froze. Their eyes flickered and went dark, and they toppled to the ground like puppets with cut strings. In town, the colossal robot swayed, its massive form teetering precariously. With a thunderous crash that shook the entire valley, it fell, crushing several blocks but miraculously missing the most populated areas. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell over Millbrook. Dan raced down the tower to find Lily and Jake, battered and bruised but alive, emerging from the woods. Survivors began to appear from their hiding places, looking around in disbelief at the fallen robots. Cheers and cries of relief filled the air. But Lily's eyes were drawn to the sky. The sickly green had faded, revealing a starry expanse that seemed vaster and more ominous than ever before. "It's over," Jake said, squeezing her hand. "We won." Lily nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever force had sent these robots, it was still out there, watching, waiting. And someday, it will be back. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the people of Millbrook began the long process of rebuilding. They had survived the reign of robots, but the world had changed forever. Humanity now knew it was not alone in the universe, and not all that lurked among the stars was benevolent. Lily looked at her father, at Jake, at all the brave survivors around her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The war was over, but the true battle for Earth's future had only just begun.